Hi everyone, my name is Ari. Welcome back to my podcast, Surrounded by Addicts, and I'm going to talk about the 10 signs of alcoholism, specifically 10 signs that I saw in my own father and other people that I knew, specifically when they were trying to hide their drinking habit. So, not somebody that is more proud or admits to being a drinker. I'm talking about people that try to downplay or hide it, and the biggest example for me was my father, who I call Jim. Jim was trying to hide it from his family. It was like an open secret. Everybody knew that he had a drinking issue, but they didn't really want to acknowledge how bad of a problem it was. And I'm assuming he was telling family members at the time that he was trying to slow down or even trying to recover. So these are just things that I noticed while living with him that even I had questions about at my young age of between 7 to about 9 years old. And yeah, so let's just get into it. I do have a list of notes, so if you see me like looking down or reading off something, it's simply because I have my notes in my hand, and that's what I'm reading off of. The first sign that I noticed was sudden or progressive want to be alone, being secluded, also preferring to go out alone over going out with others. I feel like this is a pretty common one because when you want to, indulge in a habit that you know is not good for you, or you're trying to hide from other people because you feel guilty, like you prefer to do it alone. And in Jim's case, he did already have a lot of alone time. He didn't really have to worry about taking care of me. There's other people that I lived with that would, help me out. So he had a lot of time to himself, and he always wanted that time to himself. He was very like rigid in having a set amount of time pretty much every day to do whatever. Even when it came down to trying to hang out with me, like I knew at certain times during the day to not even bother because he would just be secluded in his room, not interacting with anybody, not talking to me, not talking to the family that we lived with at the time, and always just wanted to be alone. And what really stood out to me was when he would go out alone, because he was very much a homebody. He did not really care to go out, at least from like how I knew him. So when he would want to just go for a walk or go outside just to chill outside, it was really strange to me, and I
Weird,
always got like
weird.
a off feeling about it. It just seemed like he was being sneaky for no reason. Like he would linger around the front or the backyard for no apparent reason. Obviously, that reason was most likely because he was trying to sneak drink, but at the time, being a kid observing this, it was just one of those, like, what are you doing? Why can't I be included? One of those things. So, yeah, overall, just wanting a lot of alone time was the first sign of my father's alcoholism. The second one was wanting increased privacy or getting territorial over their space. Kind of goes hand in hand, but yes, he was extremely picky about who saw what. Like, I couldn't go into his room at all without knocking. He would always, like, make sure the door would stay closed until he was done, like, cleaning up or putting away whatever. Like, I could never just run in there and say, "Hi, like I miss you." I always had to knock, wait for him to tell me to come in, and then he would always try to push me out like sooner than what I was expecting to be in there for. Same thing with like his phone or his paperwork, like even like his work bag. Like I was never really allowed to bring him his work bag. I was never allowed to use his phone without him being right on top of me. And if I were to like even move his phone, like if his phone was in my way and I needed to move it, he would freak out. He would get mad at me. He would yell at me for touching his stuff, even though all I was doing was simply moving it. One of the places that we lived together, his bedroom was in the basement and the laundry room was adjacent to it. Like it was an open concept. So you walked into the room and there was the washer and dryer, but then on the side, on the left side, there was his like bed, and his bed took up the whole space. So there was like shelving on either side, anytime I would go down there to do laundry, or anytime other people in the house would go down there to do laundry, he would keep it as like kind of clean as he could, simply because he didn't want anybody to see like what he had going on. He also had a moped scooter that the seat would lift up and it would be for storage, like his wallet would be in there or something. He would never let me look at, like, if he was opening the seat, he never allowed me to look look in there. He never allowed me to put anything in that little storage container. He was the only one that was allowed to look through it, and if I happened to be standing near him when he was doing that, he was a pretty big guy, so he would like kind of stand more in my view to make sure that I wouldn't be able to see anything. Throughout my time living with him full time, and I only see my mom on weekends, I was never allowed to just call her on his phone because he wanted to be right there. I didn't even know his password to his phone. Like, he would unlock it, open to my mom's contact, call her for me, and I would just be on the phone with her, but I had to be right next to him. I was not allowed to go into my own room. Like, wherever he was, I had to stay there. He was never allowed me to be on his phone without him being there. And overall, like, I had when we lived with his mom, in my room, I think I spoke about this before, but he, like I said, he didn't really have a lot of storages in his own room. So he would use my closet as storage, and he would get very, very, very upset if the closet door was messed with. If I ever needed to go into my own closet, he would get really upset. I would have to ask permission to open my own closet because I did have some things in there of my own, and he would have to get it for me. He would tell me almost every day, multiple times a day, to not open the closet by myself, to not look in specific bags by myself because they were filled with nips. But he was just very secretive, very territorial over what he claimed was his, and I wasn't allowed to basically look or interact with anything that was his without him being right there. The third sign was he wouldn't talk about his day. If I asked him questions about how it was, he would dismiss it. Overall, he would just tell me that, oh, it doesn't really matter what I did. I want to hear about you. Like, he would be very dodgy when it came down to answering anything about how he spent his time. When I was really young, like 6 to 7 years old, I don't really remember like conversations like that. But as I started to get older and I was going to school and he had a job, he would do the classic, like, oh, how was your day? How was school? My stepmom or whoever I lived with at the time would, ask me the same questions. And naturally, I would talk to them about pretty much the same thing. Like, what did you guys do? Because you're a kid, you're curious, you are just naturally interested about things going on in your life. But whenever those questions were asked about his day, he would usually not really say much. He would allude to the fact that he went to work, but he would never talk about what he did at work, how his day was, if something was bothering him, if there was anything good going on, good news, bad news, nothing. He would never really go into like surface level detail about how his day was. And it didn't really strike me as odd until I started to get like a little bit older and I was living with other people where I would be at school and then I would ask them like how is their day, and they would actually give me like normal answers. It wasn't, like I said, until as I was growing up where I realized that him being so dismissive about his day was probably a sign that he didn't want to get into it because he was trying to like drink, like he was probably drinking on the job, or maybe not going to work when he was supposed to, or leaving work early to drink. Even that's another example, like he would get home like later or earlier than what was expected, and when you asked why, he would just, I don't know, like, why not? Like, he never really gave concrete answers as to what his day was like. And for that reason, like, I knew what his job titles were. Like, I knew where he worked and I knew what he was mainly hired to do. But I didn't really understand the role of his job because he never really spoke about it. I visited his places of work a couple of times. And one place that he worked at was a golf course. Like he was kind of like a maintenance guy, I guess. He would drive this I forget what it's called, but basically it was just to pick up all the balls from when people do free shots, like that the big open field. He would drive a cart that would pick up the balls as it was driving, and then he would like clean them and stuff. It wasn't until that day, and he was working at this golf course for a while beforehand. It wasn't until that day where I truly knew what he did, because before that he never told me. Like I had no idea what this job consisted of. And then when he got another job, I never went there as like a bring your daughter to work day thing. So I had no idea like what he did. He would just tell me, "Oh yeah, like I do." He worked at like a sales place for like bikes and like scooters and stuff like that. He would just tell me, "Oh yeah, I help with sales." Well, what do you mean by that? Are you a salesperson? No, I like display them. Like he would never really talk about what he did. He would always say that he would really want to like visit me when he has a day off, like during his lunch break, but yet he would never. And when I would ask him, "Oh, why didn't you come by for lunch?" Oh, just like something happened. He could never just give me an actual reason. It was all just dodging left and right. The fourth sign that I noticed was he was very quick to be defensive. He would argue for no reason, slash, just be overly combative. It's going to be hard for all these signs that I'm going to be discussing to not kind of go with one another. But that's because usually when one pops up, the other one naturally starts to come along. And when it comes to addictive behavior, most addicts kind of have a similar train of thought as to how to hide their problems, how to communicate that with other people, how they interact with other people. Of course, like there's outliers, but for the most part, most addicts act and think the same when they're suffering with their addiction. So all of the signs that I'm listing are not like unique to him, and that's because that's what everybody does when they have an addiction, and they're so muddy together because they are so similar, and it's really hard to have one sign without having the other sign. So I'm sorry if all of these are kind of like just the same thing, but that's why I try to make them a little bit more detailed, because I want them to be separate from one another while also tying into one another, if that makes sense. So, yes, he would be very combative, very defensive about every little thing. Like, if I or somebody else were to keep prying him about, hey, like, how was your day? It's okay to talk to us. It's okay to, like, let us know. Did something bad happen? What's wrong? Like, if he was pried too much, or if he felt like he was being pushed too much to answer a question that he didn't want to, he would kind of just flip out, and he would flip out to the point where it wasn't even worth trying to discuss, because it would be such an overblown reaction to a simple question that most people wouldn't want to, like, you're just going to back down, because why was it so extreme in the first place? Like there was no need for it to escalate the way it did. So instead of questioning why it escalated, okay, I'm just gonna drop it. Like I don't even care anymore. Like why'd you get like that? And because that's like a really easy defense mechanism, it would be on repeat. And he was a big guy, so to some people he could be very intimidating just because of his pure size. And when he got to that point of being mad or being upset, once he let that switch flip to being from being calm to being more like threatening, it's just easy to, okay, never mind, like I'm not gonna not gonna ask any further questions. And that's what he would do. Even to me, he would have his own version of flipping out. I wouldn't say that he would necessarily like yell in my face. He's done that a couple of times, but it was more because we were arguing. But as far as like me asking him a question or not understanding why he was doing something, he would usually just try to ground me or put me in timeout, or he would get somebody else to deal with me because he didn't like the questions I was asking. But definitely with other adults in his life, I know from what my mom has told me when I was younger, like way before Not way before. When I was first born, like he was more violent where he would throw things near her, pin her up against the wall, punch her, and it was all from trying to have a basic conversation that he couldn't handle, typically about his drinking, and that's how he would react because he knew that he was guilty, he knew that he was not, being the person that he should have been. So instead of actually coming to terms with that, it's easier to just get violent, try to blame the other person, or at least try to scare the other person out of having the conversation. And like I said, that was for very little things, very little questions or situations. He would get very upset. He was like kind of easy to rage bait. Like I know rage bait is like kind of like a new term, but like it was so easy to rage bait him because like I knew that something very little, something very small would set him off. And if I wanted to mess with him because I didn't like him at that moment or I felt like how he disciplined me was wrong, I would just purposely get him upset. And then my stepmom or my grandmother or whoever was around, whoever we lived with, would usually tell him like, dude, like why are you acting like that for? But because it was so easy to get him upset and get him riled up that he would just constantly kind of end up looking a little dumb because why are you getting upset over your daughter asking you how was your day or things like that. So yeah, overall, and not these are not just signs that I've noticed in him, these are just signs in general that I've noticed in a couple different people in my life. But of course, Jim is my own father. Like he's just my easiest example that I have. Number 5 is they may become frugal to the point of to the point of being excessive about it, slash complaining about needing money or not having money. I think this one is kind of obvious on the reason why, and it's because they're spending a lot of money on booze or like their addiction of choice, of course. In Jim's case, that was always the thing. He had like maybe 5 shorts on rotation, 5 t-shirts on rotation. He never really bought pants because he was the type of person to get hot all the time. So he never found the need to buy pants. He had like 2 pairs of shoes. Like he had a very small wardrobe. He didn't really buy a lot of hygiene products. He did not have a lot of things in general. And it's hard not to think that it's because the less you have and the less you buy for hygiene and maintenance purposes, the more you can spend on that stuff. He did have a job. He did like have some sort of money to like buy food and gas and whatever, but a lot of his money went to booze, but he would also constantly complain about like the price of things. Eventually like I said, he had a scooter. He never really drove. He was too scared to drive, but a part of me thinks it's simply because cars are expensive and he did not want to deal with car insurance, car payment, car maintenance, all that. And eventually he wasn't able to drive his scooter anymore because, things happen. And he was not in a rush to get another type of vehicle transportation. And again, it's really hard not to assume that most of that money could just go to booze. He would try to cut corners. Like one of the times for Father's Day, he asked me to make him a folder, like for his document paperwork. He asked me to make him a folder because he didn't want to spend the money on a folder. I don't know. His logic was I already have, like, I had construction paper, I had glue. It'd be easier for me just to make him a folder instead of him buying one. Small example, but it's little things like that. Him just refusing to buy anything for himself, always trying to have other people buy it for him, or in my case, like trying to have me make things for him. All of it was most likely to go to his booze. He wanted a constant supply. He was big into getting nips. I touched upon it earlier. He got caught with like like multiple shopping bags, like the Walmart shopping bags. He was caught with having like 3 to 4 of those Walmart shopping bags filled to the brim with nips, not including nips that could have been like in his room, around his like scooter, or actual bottle, like full bottles of alcohol. Like he had 3 to 4 of those Walmart bags filled with nips. That's a lot of money for just nips alone. And he did smoke cigarettes, or yeah, he rolled his own cigarettes, so however much money he spent towards that supplies. So he was spending a lot of money on his addictive habits, and you could tell because he did not have anything. He was not the best at maintaining his hygiene, and he just didn't have a lot of things to show for his age. Like he barely bought the necessities for himself, and a lot of the times, because we lived with other people, necessities for me were bought by other people, or my mom would provide a lot of things for me that he didn't really have to worry about. So becoming frugal or constantly complaining about needing money was another really big one that I saw growing up from multiple different people, but especially my own father. Number 6 is lying. Typically, at least from what I understand, it starts with like little white lies that don't really matter, and then it turns into bigger lies. He was the king of lying. I can give some extreme examples that I remember distinctly, and these lies hurt even more because I didn't realize that he was lying about these things until after he died, and I was able to talk more freely with my mom about them. So, like I said, I lived with him full time. He had full time custody of me from about when I was 7 to about 10 years old. I saw my mom. I believe I was scheduled to see her like every other weekend. For the whole time period, I was scheduled to see her every other weekend. And what he would tell me is, "Oh, you're grounded from seeing your mom for this reason." Like, name a thing that I could get in trouble for, and he would tell me, "You're not going to see your mom this weekend." Now, I don't have access to talk to my mom. I don't really have access to talk to anybody else, and I didn't know that technically you can't do that. And because this was a legal custody agreement that every other weekend I would see my mom. This was something that was they went through the courts to figure this out. I didn't know that he was telling my mom that we had plans. So he would tell my mom there was like a birthday party, or if it was around the holidays, he would tell my mom that we were going to see like extended family. Like he would tell my mom that we have plans and that I couldn't see her because we would be out of town. When in reality, we would be home, and I would just be, forced to be in my room all day, and that would be it. That was one of the more consistent lies that he would tell my mom, because he would tell this lie throughout the time that he had full-time custody of me. I don't know how frequently that was the case, but I remember after he died, like years after he died, I was already living with my mom for a few years, and the topic of just him came up, and I remember we both had that like epiphany moment of like, oh my God, like he was lying about a lot of things, and she had no idea that I was grounded. And because I was assuming that she knew I was grounded, when I would see her, the following weekend or whatever, I never really thought to tell her, like, yeah, he grounded me, because I just thought, like, I don't know, I was a kid. I didn't think he would lie about that. I thought she knew. So it wasn't something that got brought up until after he died, and we would, reminisce or discuss like things that had happened during that time. Another big lie that he told was he was sent to rehab. I do believe this rehab was like court mandated, because like his mom, who we lived with at the time, got involved because something happened. He went to rehab, and he was in rehab for about like 9 months. And when he came out of rehab, I actually went to his graduation ceremony. It was in like an auditorium setting, like banquet auditorium setting. Like they had food, all that. And they literally would call people up to go get like a diploma of some sort. And it was like a great time. Like, I do remember it. But at the end of the ceremony where we're leaving, we're standing outside of the rehab place. And I remember him taking a shot. Like, I knew what a shot glass looked like. And alcohol has a really strong scent. And I remember standing outside with like directly next to him. And there was like five other guys. I don't remember seeing a woman, but there's five other guys that were standing outside, and they all took shots together right after the graduation ceremony. And I tried to bring it up to my grandmother and she dismissed it, but I think she confronted my dad because my dad got mad at me for, talking to my grandmother about it. But he lied about technically relapsing. And because he graduated, he was able to get custody of me again because he was at rehab. My grandmother had full custody of me because he was not at the house. He got back full custody of me, and because he told everybody that he graduated rehab and was doing so well, he was able to get like his own apartment with me. He was able to get some benefits to help, with the cost of having to have a child. Like, a lot of people sent things over for me, sent things over for him. Like, he lied and basically got like the perfect setup to raise me by himself. He did end up wasting it because he died like 7 months later, but that was not, again, like one of the biggest lies I know for a fact that he told, and it all had to do with his drinking habit and not wanting to get caught. For the next sign number 7, it kind of ties into with the being combative and being very defensive, but number 7 is being quick to rage slash violent outburst. Um, that kind of goes without saying. He gets very defensive, starts with just like an argument or a verbal back and forth, but then it escalates to using his physical size to hurt or intimidate somebody. He did this a lot with at least me. I can remember he would do this all the time with me. We would get into an argument that shouldn't really spiral into anything, but he would, threaten me. He would get very close to me and kind of like not yell in my face, but do that very stern, like spitting anger voice towards me. And he would make it seem like he would hit me or like flinch at me to make it seem like he was going to punch me or things like that. He did. I was told that it was like play fighting, play wrestling, but him and my drunkle actually got into a physical altercation, and he actually broke drunkle's ribs. Drunkle had to like go to the hospital afterwards, but it was a joking manner, but because of Jim's size and being so prone to violence, he went a little too far. He actually did a lot of damage. Like I said earlier, he constantly like threaten my mom with violence, push her, not really push her, I guess push her, pin her up against the wall, throw things near her face or at her head, and things of that nature. He did a better job, in my opinion, keeping this side of him under wraps. I don't think he would be able to go full rage mode simply because of the type of people that he lived with, and he didn't really do a lot. Like, he was constantly in the house, at the house. So if he were to be too violent in a manner that would cause a lot of alarm, like would be alarming to everybody, he wouldn't have been able to live at the houses that he lived at for as long as he did. So overall, he didn't really have too many of these violent outbursts that I can remember. He was more intimidator. Like, he would try to intimidate people with his size, especially me, because me and him just didn't get along. But in general, um, I feel like being quick to being violent or quick to rage is something that addicts especially struggle with because, one, you're in an altered state of mind anyways, and when someone is threatening your habit, your addiction, or calling you out on your behavior, you don't really have the capability to think through it properly, and the easiest feeling to kind of allow yourself to be overtaken by is anger. Like, it's easy to let anger control you when you're in that state of mind. So if you already were arguing with the person, there's not really a big jump from arguing to fighting when you're in that state of mind. It's just one of those things that I feel like is kind of well known, that addicts, especially under the influence of alcohol, can turn violent quickly. Like, there's so many examples in the news of like problems going, like bar fights. Like, I feel like that's like a pretty recurring like theme in some movies, that there's like a bar fight going on, and it's because there's truth to it. Like, when you're in that state of mind, just violence is one of those things that can come out of it. So, like I said, for him, I wouldn't say the violent part was really a thing that we had to worry about. He was not the type to punch like holes in the walls. He was not the type to push people up against the wall like frequently. He would be, in my opinion, more of just trying to intimidate you, and he wouldn't let himself get to that point of being mad. Number 8 is altered sleep pattern, inconsistent sleep, or just overall having trouble with it, having trouble sleeping. When you get drunk, it's actually impossible or close to impossible to get REM sleep. REM sleep is just the deepest sleep that you can get, and that's like when your brain is fully us not your brain. That's when you are fully asleep, and there's certain brain processes that can only take place during REM sleep. But like I said, being drunk, you can't reach that state. So you're not getting the full type of rest that you should be. And when you are a chronic alcoholic, and this is something that you struggle with, there's a different type of tired, sickly look because of how much sleep that they're not getting. Like instead of having a normal skin tone, it's usually has like a gray hue over it. The bags under their eyes are usually much more exaggerated. The skin can start to sag or look more wrinkly a lot sooner than it should, or if they are older, it's more like obvious. um Altered sleep pattern. If you're drinking and you're getting up all the time, you might have to get up to pee, or you're having, like stomach problems. So they might be up at odd times during the night because of their drinking habit. They might be up later, up earlier than what they normally used to do. Um, for me, I lived with people that had all sorts of types of problems with sleeping because of their drinking habit. I've known people that they just can't sleep in, so they're up extremely early at like 2, 3, 4 in the morning, or because they get so drunk they fall asleep really early and then they're up in the middle of the night. Like, drinking overall really messes up your sleep quality, never mind how much it messes it up in the long term. So, just overall, an alcoholic has a very messed up sleeping schedule. Typically, you can usually see it on their face. They can't get good quality sleep. They can't typically sleep for a long period of time, whether it be for bathroom or not feeling good and just waking up from those symptoms. And like I said, it reads on the face really quickly. And also, you'll start to see, or I started to see, like other physical changes, like their faces usually gets red pretty quickly. They sweat more profusely, and they might get like either really skinny because their sleep schedule is so altered that they don't really have time to eat, or they get really fat, like the beer belly thing. They might get really fat because, again, when you're not sleeping a lot, you might be more hungry to make up for the fact that you're not really sleeping. So your body wants energy, so you eat shit food. Or it could be the opposite. You feel so gross that the last thing you want is food. I've seen both sides. I've known alcoholics that are extremely skinny because they just feel so much like shit that they can't stomach anything. But in Jim's case, he was just always hungry from not really sleeping that well, but also trying to be awake for me and having other responsibilities. So he would just grub out on just food that he shouldn't be eating, but when you're not sleeping properly, you don't really have another choice. Number 9 is being forgetful. Now, of course, a lot of a lot of things, a lot of problems can make you forgetful, but with alcoholism specifically, I mean, if you, most people who have gotten drunk before, you don't remember everything. It's really difficult to remember what happened after you reach a certain level of being drunk, let alone blackout drunk. Like blackout drunk, I have never experienced that. I guess the appropriate word to describe it is I am afraid to get blackout drunk. I have no desire to ever get to that point. I've heard stories from family members, from friends about their experience with getting blackout drunk and what they remember, what they don't remember, what they got themselves into, that they didn't know what happened until, hours later, and it's just not something I want to deal with. But just being blackout drunk alone, of course, impacts how forgetful you are. And as time goes on, as damages your brain, of course, it's going to impact your memory, your timeline, how you see things versus the reality of things. And I've never been able to have a conversation with my drunkle, who is, I call him a drunkle because he's a drunk uncle. Most conversations I have with him, we kind of repeat over the same things over and over again because he does not remember. He does not remember what he said. He does not remember what had happened. He doesn't remember anything. And it's just one of those symptoms of, I guess, wet brain is the best way to describe it. I don't know how quickly being forgetful can set in when you have a drinking habit, but definitely over the span of years and decades, it takes a toll on your memory and overall becomes really difficult to have a conversation with the person. But even in a short term, like window period, I've noticed that like being forgetful starts kind of out of nowhere. Like one day they seem fine, but then a week or two goes by and suddenly they can't remember like where their keys are, where their phone is, where their wallet is. They can't remember like plans that they made. They can't remember where they put anything. They can't remember something important that they were supposed to tell you. And then it gets like worse and worse and worse where they can't remember like a really good day that they had, a really special memory that they had. Like they can't accurately describe a memory that they used to be able to actively describe, or they warp timelines, or they create like fake stories, not on purpose, but because they can't remember the actual story, their brain just like messes it up and retells them a story that's not true, but because they can't remember it, they tell it like it is true. And it's like a really weird thing to kind of see, or well, to interact with, to hear somebody with that problem, with an addiction like that. It's really weird to hear them talk about something because you'll know what time frame they're referring to, but the way that you remember it versus the way they remember it can be so vastly different, where it's like, wow, like what did you do to yourself? And that's usually how it goes. Like, what did you do to yourself? How did you get to that point? And the final sign, number 10, is mood swings. I feel like I feel like mood swings is like a symptom of like everything. It's just like same thing with like brain fog. Like brain fog is a symptom for so many different things, where it's like, do you even count that as a symptom when it counts for every other problem? But I figured I would put mood swings on there because I have been like, it is true. It's just some moments they're the happiest person in the world, other moments they're not. When Jim was alive and he was trying to be sneaky, it would be like we could be like outside playing, having like a grand old time, and then at the drop of a hat, just he's upset. Like he could be sad, like on the verge of tears. You say one thing to try and cheer him up, he gets mad, and then he's just really upset. And we would go through like the whole like emotional stability roller coaster of trying to figure out what's wrong in the span of a day, just for the next day to repeat the same cycle. Like it seems like everything is fine, something minor or major happens, mood shift, and then one little glimpse of hope, shines through, and then boom, just really overly happy. And I'm not talking about how like when you go through when most people that don't struggle with addiction, when you go through your day-to-day life, nobody is happy constantly. Nobody, well, hopefully you are not sad constantly. A lot of our emotions are just like temporary, like states of mind, and it's normal for them to fluctuate. But I feel like on average most people are kind of neutral about what's going on. There might be one moment that sticks out that makes you really upset, but that may not stick with you for the whole day. When it comes down to mood swings pertaining to alcoholism, it's the extreme of the extremes. It's not like, oh yeah, some like I got like a nice drink from Dunkin'. I'm really happy about it. Like it's really good, and then oh my god, I'm stuck in traffic. I'm really annoyed. It's like overjoy, over excitement about something very small, and then an hour or two later be so depressed, so sad that they're bawling their eyes out, they're complaining about wanting to off themselves, things of that nature. Very extreme dips in emotion, in how they control their feelings and how they express it. Overall, the mood swings are just very exaggerated. Not a normal emotional fluctuation. I'm talking about very drastic changes in a relatively short time span. So yeah, that concludes the list of 10 that concludes the list of signs of alcoholism, specifically for people that are more trying to hide it or are not really ready to fully admit that they have a problem. Of course, these are just in my experience with the people that I know in my life personally, from what I've seen online with conversations about addiction and alcoholism. These, I'm not a doctor, researcher of any sort. These are just signs that I've pulled out of my own ass, basically, from my own life experiences. I may or may not try to record another episode today, so if you see this outfit in another episode, that is why. But overall, yes, thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy your day. Bye. Thank you for listening to Surrounded by Addicts. Remember to take life one day at a time and to enjoy the little things in life. Stay tuned for the next episode.